Well, women
interjector.
don't have the same intuitive disgust about it that men do. That's the interesting part.
You think?
Same
Well, I know
intuitive
so.
disgust?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, this is.
In what way?
Yeah. So, paternity tests. Those are pretty recent inventions, right?
Yeah.
How would men assure paternity before a paternity test?
The way that they looked when the baby came out.
How else? What would be the best way to assure that the child was yours?
Make sure that you're the only one having sex
Right, you're
with
the
her.
only one, right?
Right.
So, for the assurance of reproduction, for the purposes of survival, right? It makes sense why men have this kind of like revolt carriage to women with multiple men. They want to assure that that's their offspring. If they can't assure that it's the offspring, it also is detrimental to the mother, because then they can just deny it, right? It's not mine. You slept with multiple men, so that's it. That's why that revolt or disgust is there for men. It's not
You don't
always
think that
there
that's
for
societal in there too?
women. What do you mean?
I don't know if there's.
This is just what you find socially when you
Yeah.
when you give different polls and different questions between the sexes.
Correct.
It's not that women don't care about it. I'm not saying that, right? And some women really care about it. Just that they seem to care about it less than men care about it with them.
Or a different reason why, like for women it'd be protection or safety, because if you have someone that's
Yeah, it's
sleeping
not
around a
revulsion.
lot, right? We might, yeah. So if you use that terminology with someone, a guy might go revolted. A woman, we might forgive more or something, or we might look at a
Which,
different angle.
Well, that would tell me that it's just not as prominent of a deal breaker as it is for men.
Or if you just did how you ask, because I do think that there's women that are going to be like, I don't want a guy that's sleeping around too much because I don't want to catch something, or I don't want to.
Yeah, but
whatever.
let me here. I'll show you a big distinct difference that I think will maybe change your view on this. So, if you tell a guy, well, there's a woman and she's 28, 29 years old, right, and she's still a virgin, they think, well, that's a pretty good catch, right? 28, 29. But the flip side is that women will often reject men at 28, 29 who are virgins because they think, what the fuck is wrong with this guy that no woman wants him? So that happens often to men.
I don't know. I've seen it in coaching. It just depends on different societies. And then also, I have a lot of clients that are 30s and 40s who are virgins.
Mostly men, though, right?
Just
I coach women too.
just one sec. With your clientele and how they don't really care.
I think it just depends. As far as for being a virgin, if the guy's insecure about being a virgin, he'll naturally go towards and by accident date women who will say something like that, right? But the more he heals from that insecurity, the more that all of a sudden he's naturally around people that really don't care. But as far as societal, we've noticed that certain countries don't necessarily consider body count or care, like Spain. Spain, for instance, women are very much so more sexually dominant there. They even go half on the bill or pay the bill is usually that kind of. So some of it's societal, some of it's very primal, of course. Like you want to make sure that you're procreating, that your seed that's yours. So of course there's something to it on that one. So I think it's also how you phrase the question to someone.
All right, let's do a really.
I don't know if it would be how you phrase it. What do you mean how you phrase the question?
If you ask a woman, hey, would you care if you were dating a guy and he was sleeping around with a whole bunch of women, while you guys were in a relationship? I'm sure she's going to have like a repulse factor in that, right?
Yeah, of course.
Sure.
But that's not really what you would ask, right? So what the question determines, like, if you're asking previous partners, right? So I think if you were to keep all things equal, right, and you were to say to any number of different women, there's a man here who has a 100 body count, right, versus there's a woman here to the same equal amount of men who has a 100 body count, that the men would be far more revolted by that than the women.
Sure, and I'm just saying with that one, sometimes we notice that has a little bit to do with society, like in Spain compared to here, for instance. But yes, you have that for sure.
I'm picking up on a lot of words. Like you said, primal. I think you said something about like when you're selecting a mate to procreate and everything. Like for me, body count and like putting value on anybody, male, female, whatever, based on who they've touched or not touched. Like we're making equations and trying to figure this shit out. But like, at the end of it, like we're not in BC era. We don't have to pick mates on how much they said.
because
Well, you can go get pregnant by yourself as a woman without a man even being involved. So I just feel like we're at this point
no,
in
man,
our
you definitely
society.
can't get pregnant without a man being involved.
Well, you got to have some sperm somewhere.
Right.
I guess what I mean is without intercourse or without worrying about how many persons that man or woman have been with. I just think that putting value on a person because of body count is so not 2025 because like we don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah, but it's still part of a survival mechanism. So
For who?
we
For
can't
men or heterosexual
I'll
men or
explain it.
everybody?
Well, I'll explain it.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
human beings.
Really quick, before
Yep.
you take a sip, we
All
got
right.
to do a cheers and then.
Oh, cool.
Cheers, salute to Jungle. Welcome to the jungle. Thank you, appreciate it, man.
Woo.
So human beings are pattern recognition machines. That's how we live our lives.
Patterns change. But keep going. Sorry to interrupt.
How do you know they change?
That's evolution, sir.
Right. So you know patterns change because they don't fit the pattern that you're used to.
Yep.
That's how, right?
Pretty much,
that would
yeah.
be the way. So if you're a pattern recognition machine and you notice a pattern between people who do this type of behavior, right? This is what I see with them. People who do this type of behavior, this is what I see with them. People, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The reason that's ingrained inside of you to make those risk calculations is so that you can survive and thrive long term. And every human being does this, like all of them.
In
We do
ways, I
eventually.
get it. Yeah. But, I just feel like as society advances, some of our mindset has to advance and change too. Because, like, we're not out here catching AIDS and STDs as much as we used to because
Yeah, we are.
have those.
STDs
Some people-
STDs are at almost an all-time high, I believe. Like they're
Herpes,
increasing.
HPV.
They're increasing.
Yeah.
In fact, STDs we almost got rid of
Yeah.
are now back with a bang.
That's interesting. So that, to me, that says that more, I may be wrong. This is just like a personal opinion. Like maybe if STDs are kind of on a rise or not going down, it seems like promiscuity is in a way because people who have STDs are obviously still having sex and having sex and having sex. So some consider it a very important thing. But
there's reasons though, right? Like it may be there could be trends you could point to that promiscuity is going down actually, but what is going up is things like sex work and
Yes.
the amount of people who are involved in sex work.
Promiscuity
that
in
is
different
a place.
avenues,
That's a
for
place
sure.
where you would grab a lot of STDs and get them out to the general public, right? Your risk assessment for that is way, way, way higher. So if that's the case, you wouldn't actually need general societal promiscuity to go up, just a small portion of the society to engage in high-risk behavior and then move it out. That's what happened with HIV, for instance.
Yeah.
Right? Same thing. It was a small subset of the population, but they were heavily promiscuous. That moved out to the other subsets of the population.
in a way, yeah.
I think it's also because there's a lack of sexual education in schools now.
Yeah.
No, there's not.
Where I'm from, I took a sex ed class 4th grade just because of puberty, and I had one semester of one in 7th grade, but my high school never taught it. This middle schools I used to go to, they don't teach it anymore. I don't know anyone who's younger than me who gets taught sex ed anymore.
My son is 17 and he had no idea what that was. He goes to a local high school and he's like, no one's
Yeah,
teaching them condoms and STDs.
That's part of the general curriculum for most
It
schools.
definitely should be. I think it's so.
They might
I
have
think it's
taken
the
away.
areas.
It's the area.
But also,
Yeah.
it's not like, I've never really bought this. There's not enough sexual education in schools. There was a huge primary campaign run on that throughout the 90s and in the early 2000s, and it didn't do anything. Nothing. And here's the thing, convincing me that the average 13 to 15-year-old doesn't know anything about sex
Oh, yeah,
and
they know
modernity is
things.
fucking insane.
Oh yeah,
Of
you're gonna
course they
learn.
do.
Things.
Of
You're
course
gonna
they
learn.
do.
You can Google things now. I don't. With sex education and everything, it's like you're not gonna really understand a lot of it until you experience it or make the mistakes, and you won't even hear it anyway. A lot of it too, like trauma. Trauma has a lot to do with whether or not you're escaping in sex, and that's at any age. So you can tell someone all day long, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, but they're gonna.
I think trauma's a cope. I think that. Here's what I think. I think that a lot of women utilize the trauma excuse for their promiscuous past when they really just wanted to get dicked down by a stud. And what they do is they cope about it. And they're like, no, see, the reason that I went down and got dicked down by so many studs is because my trauma that happened when I was younger, this bad thing happened to me. And that's what made it so that all these handsome men just had to fuck me, right? And it's
Maybe the younger ones. The older ones are owning it.
So I hear that and I think to myself, maybe not. Maybe it's not the fact that you were traumatized, but the fact that You just wanted to have sex with a lot of good-looking guys.
I mean that, absolutely.
So-
That can
of
be
course.
healing. That can
Yes.
be healing in ways.
Yeah.
I think so that, like, if a guy said, like, oh, I just had a really bad breakup and she really broke my heart, and, like, oh, I'm back on the streets, the boys will be like, yeah, get back on the streets, but, like, when women do that, like you said, it's kind of, were you really hurt? Like, is that really a trauma response, or are you just being wild?
It's well, what
Coping.
it is, yeah,
Yeah.
it's coping. What it is
Some
they're
of it's coping.
They're doing this. They're going, look, my dating chances drastically go down because I've slept with and now the numbers are fucking astronomical, like 50, 60, 70 guys, right? I've slept with that many guys.
You
when,
have?
When people,
Wait.
when
You
people realize that.
60 to 70 chicks. I mean, dudes.
Boy, you got me, Brian. So
Clip it and shift
that's
it
what
once.
that's what they'll say, right?
Yeah.
And so if they do, right, their chances for having like the kind of more high status man, especially in their 30s, is going to greatly decrease in comparison to women who haven't. So if that's the case, like, they have every reason to make an excuse to cope about it, to be like, no, it's not my fault. It was some trauma that I had that got treated, this type of